Welcome to the sixth round post-fight show. I'm Mookie Alexander, joined this week by Dayne Fox, and we are here to talk about what happened at UFC Uruguay. Zane and Eddie are out this weekend because they had literally everything better to do, so you get me and Dane instead. So, Dane, this is the first time that I'm doing this show with you, and what a lousy main event we have to talk about. That was brutal.
That's putting it lightly. I'm a little bit pissed off at Zane and Eddie because, damn, they know which card to pick to miss out on. But not much we can do about it. Shevchenko defended her belt, and is that all we need to say about that fight? Because there's really not much else that needs to be said.
Well, we are obligated to talk a couple of minutes about it, and I guess we got to find the right angle for how awful this fight was. So Valentina Shevchenko defends her women's flyweight title with a shutout 50-45 win over Liz Carmouche. And I have to be honest, I genuinely think that game plan that Carmouche's team implemented was designed to lose 50-45 and take as little damage as possible, because it certainly wasn't intended to win.
Oh, hell no. She sat back on her heels and let Shevchenko pick her apart. And anybody who knows anything about the sport knows that if you give Shevchenko that type of fight against somebody like Carmouche, she was going to take it. I think probably the most disappointing thing about it is, Carmouche is going to walk away from this fight just pissed off at herself that she didn't try a different strategy. And it was brutal.
Her plan, first of all, she stayed way so far on the outside. She might as well have been out of the octagon when trying to strike with Shevchenko. And then her takedowns were obviously unsuccessful. Shevchenko is, of course, a very strong fighter, certainly a lot stronger than whenever they fought, 9 years ago? And we don't even have any footage of that to determine how that first fight played out. We only have the ending of cut stoppage to note. But Shevchenko is just a way better fighter than 2019 Carmouche. Better striker, better grappler, better wrestler, and she got a couple of knockdowns of Carmouche, and even then it wasn't anything to get you out of your seat. It just felt like I was watching a practice session. Yeah.
Well, a lot of it was the fact that Carmouche didn't feel like a threat at all. When she did engage, Shevchenko just immediately, like there was the knockdown or she stuffed the takedown or whatever it was. Carmouche didn't feel like she belonged in the cage with her, and it just kind of all set us into a state of narcolepsy.
Yeah, that's a good word to put to it. With the thing with the women's flyweight division is Jessica Ai is not in Shevchenko's league. Neither is Liz Carmouche. So the options are thin for Shevchenko in this, what is essentially a nascent division. It's not been around very long. So presumably, if she's not going to fight either Amanda Nunes or whomever is going to be the strawweight champion by the end of this month, be it Jessica Andrade or Weili Zhang, I guess Shevchenko fights Caitlin Chookagian. And is that fight going to be any bit better than, or even any bit more competitive than these last two Shevchenko title defenses?
Given that Chookagian is the world champion at striking air, I can't imagine it would be.
Yeah, you're going to hear the oxygen is going to around Shevchenko. The air around Shevchenko is going to take an insane beating that night, but it's not going to excite the crowd either. So it is one of the worst title fights I have ever seen in the UFC. It's not like Shevchenko is a bad fighter or anything. She's a dominant fighter. She's an exceptional fighter. It was just so devoid of action from start to finish that even the most exciting moments of the fight, the two knockdowns and I guess the takedown, were immediately followed up with just insane stretches of boredom.
Lay and pray, yeah. It reminds me of Anderson Silva's reign circa like 2008, when he was defending against Patrick Cote and Talis Lades.
Yeah.
It's bad. It's bad.
Yeah, and we got to acknowledge that with Shevchenko, her entertainment value is very dependent on her opponent. So like Jessica is going to try and take the fight to her, and of course it ended up being a complete wipeout. But Carmouche really just gave her the exact sort of fight where Shevchenko can never even get into second gear and still win a comfortable decision. Shevchenko's got quite a number of non-exciting fights in the UFC, so it'll take an exciting fighter like a Jessica Andrade to be to draw that sort of aggression out of Shevchenko, because when she is aggressive, she's quite good to watch. But as we've seen in this fight, as we saw even in the second Amanda Nunes fight, if it's slow paced and you're waiting for Shevchenko to do the work, you know what you're going to get, and it's not a lot of fun.
Yeah. I think another aspect that was disappointing about it was Carmouche damn near pulled off the upset against Ronda Rousey with that rear naked choke by taking the fight to her. You would have felt that she would have, taken that same approach against Shevchenko. But instead, like you said, I think she was just content to go to a decision, to be able to say that she wasn't finished the way that she was in her first fight. And oh hell, that's not how you want to walk out of a title fight. You want to walk out knowing that you gave everything, and I can't see. No, I'm done.
Yeah, I think we've maxed out our discussion, the amount of discourse we can invest into a fight as bad as this one. So let's get to the actual fight of the night on this card. Vicente Luque beating Mike Perry by split decision. That was a very high level bout, and frankly, it just got elevated, maybe artificially, because the rest of the card wasn't that good. But Luque and Perry landed some bombs on each other that would have stopped several other fighters, and you could have made a solid case for either guy to win it. That's why I think the split decision is not surprising. And the pivotal moment of the fight, you can say, because all three judges gave Luque the last round, that flying knee wrecked Mike Perry's nose and turned him into Artie Lange.
Oh, God, that easily one of the worst broken noses in the history of this sport. Good hell, his the middle of his nose was a good inch or so to the, I can't remember if it was left or right. I want to say to his right, but either way, that was brutal. And the fact that Perry kept going, we've always known that the guy's had some cojones, but that takes it to another level. It was one of those fights where even though Luque walked out with his hand raised, the level of respect for both fighters around the MMA community just went up immensely.
Yeah, I would say that a credit to Mike Perry. This is one of his more composed fights that I've seen of him, and probably one of his best fights from a technical standpoint.
Absolutely.
He was landing some good combinations on Luque. He did get a little bit wild at times, but this was a really back and forth affair. I think one of the other things that made a significant impact on this fight was, prior to the flying knee, Luque was piecing up Perry with body kicks and leg kicks, and I think that was hampering Perry's movement significantly. And I suspect that's also why Perry started shooting for takedowns. And the last takedown led to a guillotine choke effort by Luque, and Perry spilled out all of the blood. I mean, all of the blood. He didn't get submitted, but basically from a judging standpoint, do you weigh the significant submission attempt over Perry getting a takedown, of which the only offense he had was soft body punches? To me, I think you weigh the offense towards the scoring towards Luque in that sense.
Oh, 100%. He was attempting to finish the fight. Perry was attempting to get in position to finish the fight. So, and it's not like Luque, it was a long shot either. He had that in tight, and Perry ended up leaking enough plasma onto the mat that that the Red Cross was pissed off about that. They could have put that blood to some good use.
Yeah, so Perry is in the hospital at the time we're recording this, and just looking at his nose again, yeah, it's dangling towards his right, and in a way it's not supposed to go. It just brutal. And now with Luque, he's won 6 straight fights. I don't know how he's been unranked for this long, but he's beaten Nico Price, Chad Laprise, Jalen Turner, Brian Barberina, Derek Krantz, and now Perry is probably his best win out of that stretch. It's time for him to get a ranked opponent. And Jeff Neal did an interview recently where he expected to fight the Luque versus Perry winner. I would absolutely watch Jeff Neal versus Vicente Luque. That would be an awesome fight.
Absolutely. I'm totally fine with that. I do know that Luque was calling out for Stephen Thompson. I don't think he'll get that fight, but if that one's lined up, I'm fine with that one too.
I doubt they're going to give him Wonder Boy. That might be a little too high up the rankings, given he is unranked at the time, but he should be ranked. Neal is been sensational lately, but it's way overdue for Luque to get a significant step up in competition. In fairness, he was supposed to fight Neil Magny earlier this year, but Magny's USADA suspension nixed everything, and that's how he ended up with Derek Krantz. Yeah. But for Mike Perry, this is a case where I know you do the winners and losers column, but he's certainly not a loser. He's a loser in the sense of that busted nose. He's going to be gone for a bit, but his stock, as you said, it did get raised because between the Alex Oliveira win and the close loss of Vicente Luque, which you can make a legitimate case that he won the fight, it seems like Perry has turned a little bit of a corner here into becoming a much more polished fighter. And I'm not talking top 5 level or anything, but he is not going to be an easy out for just about anybody.
No. Well, he's never been an easy out, but he's had the reputation as one of the ultimate knuckleheads in the sport. You know, he's got an iron chin. He hits like a truck, but now he's adding some additional craft to what he does in the ring, as opposed to just going out there and brawling. It's showing. He outgritted Oliveira, and he damn near was able to put away. Well, I shouldn't say put away, but he gave Luque all that he could handle. And like you said, if the decision had gone in favor of Perry, I would not have griped one bit. I totally could have seen the fight going in his favor. He's legitimately. He's not going the route of Lando Venata. You know, the UFC's put a lot of push behind him, and they're actually getting some payment out of it. He's becoming a real fighter. His record may not reflect exactly what the UFC wants out of him, but I think he's paying off.
Yeah, I would have to agree there. Just compare the Perry who fought Max Griffin, because that Perry, just sloppy footwork. He's just getting countered to pieces, and he's predictable to a fault. But the progression from him against Alan Jouban, that loss to Jouban, to the loss to Griffin, and now the loss to Luque, if you just compare the losses, you can see the tangible improvements that Perry has made in his game. And I'm excited to see him fight just about any time. He is a great action fighter, and he's developing into a bit more than that. And that's good for him. And the toughness certainly goes a long way, because that knee was just devastating.
Yeah, one of the most brutal. Oh, God. I don't know how in the hell Perry kept fighting. Like I said, a credit to his toughness.
Yeah, so like I said, this was fight of the night. Probably fight of the night. Yeah, well-deserved. Probably the fight of the night in the eyes of the Uruguayan fans would be their local product, Eduardo Garagorri, getting a unanimous decision win over Humberto Bandenay. It was 30-27. Look, this wasn't a bad fight or anything. It had some stretches of pretty good action. Other than the fact that this fight was in Uruguay and they had to appease the local crowd, it shouldn't have been anywhere near a main card.
No. It's the type of fight that you'll see in your local community MMA card. You know, not a bad fight as far as that goes, but no disrespect to Bandenay or Garagorri. I don't want to see them on a UFC card. I know that sounds kind of like a douchey thing to say, but you know, you don't sign a local guy to field the kickoffs in an NFL game or something like that just because you want a feel good story. No, you legitimately go out and you sign the best athletes to do the damn job. So again, probably I'm being a little bit harsh, but you know what? Good moment for Garagorri. He gets a win in front of his home crowd.
Yeah, it's a combination of Garagorri getting that win, so good for him, and crowd loved it. But on the other side, Bandenay does not belong in the UFC.
No, he does not.
That's 3 straight losses for him. And not only, what was frustrating is he kept doing the same thing over and over, and it repeatedly failed on him. He was having success taking down Garagorri, and then he would try and aggressively go for full mounts, and then Garagorri would just stand back up. What did you expect?
He has no grappling control on the ground. So, I mean, like you said, it was kind of fun. Overall, fairly sloppy, though. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like the less said about the fight, the better.
Yeah, so we really can't go on too much further than this. So I should note that this was a featherweight fight. So Garagorri in a stacked featherweight division. He's been can crushing on the regional scene. Bandenay is one of his better wins, but featherweight is such a shark tank that he's got a lot to work on if he wants to stay in the UFC beyond his standard 4-fight contract. But Bandenay, his days are probably numbered at 1 and 3. Let's get to the light heavyweight division. Volkan Oezdemir, probably, I'm not even going to say probably, I think it's undeniably the most complete and most impressive performance of his career, knocking out Ilir Latifi, the god himself, 4 minutes, 31 seconds into round 2. And that knockout was a long time coming because Latifi had gotten dominated from basically the opening couple of minutes of the fight. And Oezdemir, for somebody who had problems with cardio, and if he didn't get the knockout early, he would just fade badly like he did against Cormier, like he did against Anthony Smith. He was more composed against Dominic Reyes, more economical with the strike selection, and he was very patient in this fight, too. He could have really been aggressive and tried to finish Latifi sooner, but he didn't, and it paid off, and it was a spectacular finish in the end.
Absolutely. He implemented a few new techniques with the jump knees, the step-in knees, and just brutalized Latifi's face. And, he used the jab effectively early, too. It wasn't until Latifi was basically a human punching bag that Oezdemir began loading up. And like you said, that ending was spectacular. Latifi ended up falling flat on his face after that last ground strike. It was brutal. And, I mean, let's face it, the Horse Lord is one of our favorites on Bloody Elbow. So even though impressed with Ozdemir's victory, it still kind of hurts a little bit to see Latifi go down like that.
Yeah, that's kind of the first time I've seen Latifi actually look old in a fight.
Yeah.
He was slow, and he's never been the quickest guy in the world, and he's not got great foot speed or anything of that nature, but Oezdemir was just a step ahead of him. Those knees, he was landing at will, and I actually thought he was going to knock him out with a knee. Latifi, when he couldn't get his wrestling going, other than one neat slam of which Oezdemir got back up immediately, it felt like it was just a matter of time because stylistically, if Oezdemir is going to gas, it's going to be against somebody who's got the volume to make him work. And Latifi, historically, is not that guy. He is one big power shot, explosive movements, and when you combine that with the fact that Oezdemir was going to the body effectively and consistently throughout the fight, Latifi was looking up at the clock like a minute or two into round 2. So you sensed that the end was near.
Oh, yeah. And that slam takedown that he landed was within the first 2 minutes of the fight. After that, he was completely gassed. Well, I shouldn't say completely, but, by the end of the fight, I was thinking that Latifi's corner probably needed to throw in the towel in between rounds if he made it that far, but he didn't. I think at this point, it's probably safe to say that Latifi's peaked because he is 37 at this point. I know that's not necessarily ancient for light heavyweight, but he's been in a couple of brutal battles and he's starting to slow down. And like you said, never that quick in the first place. As for Oezdemir, like you said, he looked the best that he ever has. I would not be shocked if he's able to do title talks because who else is there aside from, like Johnny Walker or Corey Anderson? The winner of that will probably get John Jones somewhere down the line. Oezdemir is only 29. It's not out of the realm of possibility he could get back in there.
Yeah, it's weird because, of course, it's light heavyweight, so we're talking about a man who came into to Saturday night on a 3-fight losing skid, and he knocks Latifi out, and suddenly he is not too far away from a title shot. This division might be getting better in terms of all the up-and-coming talent, but it is still a very low bar to clear when you want to be talking about title contention. And on the topic of that, he brought up in the post-fight interview, he wanted either a rematch with Dominic Reyes, who's fighting Chris Weidman, so forget about that, or Jan Blachowicz. And I don't mind Jan Blachowicz Oezdemir at all. I think that's actually a really good fight to make. And you probably could give the winner of that one a title shot.
Absolutely. I mean, the way that you put it, you said that we've got all these young up-and-coming talents. The problem is that they're coming. They're not here yet. If they don't do Blachowicz, another one that I thought he might be wise to call out would be somebody like Rakic, who just knocked out Manoa. And the main reason I say that is if Oezdemir is smart, he recognizes that he wants to get these guys out of the way before they've reached their full potential, get them when they're on the up as opposed to when they are up. And I don't know. That's my thoughts if I were him.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Alexander Rakic because I think arguably more so than Johnny Walker or even Khalil Roundtree, I think Rakic has got the best potential to really be a future title challenger. I'm still not completely sold on Walker. I got to see him actually fight longer than a couple of minutes and not just completely bulldoze his opponents as he has been up to this point. But with Oezdemir, if he fights Rakic, that's an up-and-coming guy who's already ranked number 11. That's perfectly sensible matchmaking. And there's a chance that Latifi could drop significantly out of the top 10, and Rakic moves up without even fighting. So you have that, or you have Blachowicz, who's ranked number 5. You can't really go wrong with either matchup, because the other options, Anthony Smith, I think, is out for a while, and he lost to him, and I don't want to see a rematch of that. Agreed. We know what Thiago Santos is dealing with. He's not going to be fighting for a while. Cormier is ranked number 1, and he's not fought at light heavyweight in a year and a half. Oezdemir was his last light heavyweight fight, and he's not going to. So Anderson and Walker are booked. Teixeira is booked against, I think, Nikita Krylov. I think Serkinov's book. Shogun is still ranked somehow, and Johnny Walker is fighting Corey Anderson. So, and Gustafsson is quote unquote retired, but who knows at this point?
He's been getting the itch.
Yeah. So Oezdemir basically has the matchmakers rather have their work basically presented to them. Yeah, it's either Blachowicz or it's Rakic.
Yep.
So moving on from Oezdemir and Latifi, let's get to middleweight debut of Rodolfo Vieira. I say middleweight debut. I mean middleweight fight, the UFC debut of Rodolfo Vieira, one of the best grapplers in the world, and he got a slick arm triangle choke finish of Oskar Piechota in the second round, late in the second round, in fact. And Vieira, I thought he looked pretty good. There were some concerns that his explosiveness and his power could lead to his cardio going on him a bit. And there was a stretch in round 2 where I thought he might have been tiring, but I was wrong. And Piechota was also tiring, in fairness. And when Vieira has a dominant position on you, you might as well just preemptively tap, because your most middleweights are not going to get out of that danger.
Oh, hell no. Not with Vieira. Honestly, I was actually happy that it didn't end in the first round, because I wanted to see if Vieira had a little bit of a gas tank. Whether you want to say going into the second round or not, test that. He was drugged through the mud a little bit, and he was able to submit Piechota. And Piechota is not a bad grappler by any means. I'm not saying he's on Vieira's level, but he showed solid defense in the first round. And the way that it played out, I'm liking Vieira more than what I did walking into the contest.
Yeah, there are just levels to this game when you're talking about jiu-jitsu black belts.
Yep.
Vieira is a black belt. Piechota is a black belt from Robert Drysdale, who's a reputable coach. But Vieira is an ADCC winner. He's won numerous world titles in various grappling competitions. He is just phenomenal on the mat. So this was only the second time he's been out of round 1 in his brief MMA career. So he's 6-0. One of the things I did like about Vieira is in round 1, he showed some pretty heavy ground and pound on Piechota. Yep. Kind of the Jacare type of feel to it, where unlike Damian Maia is not going to do a whole lot of damage to you in the same way that Jacare does when Jacare's got top position on somebody, like, say, Vitor Belfort. So Vieira had definitely had Piechota not in serious trouble, but he gave him something to think about there at the end of round 1. And then round 2, he used those strikes to set up, I think it was full mount, and then eventually the arm triangle choke finish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he even flashed a jab. It still needs some work, but it's functional at this point. It's only going to get better because Vieira is still relatively inexperienced with striking. So, yeah, I think there's a lot to like out of this debut for Vieira.
Yeah, and he's only 29 years old. Mm-hmm. So that's a lot different than some other grappling wizards we've seen who are already well into their 30s and past their athletic prime. So Vieira has got he's got his win. Now, as for what's next for him, you look at the middleweight division, and once you get past number 12 or 13 in the rankings, the quality drops off significantly. Just for the heck of it, I'd love to see him face Kevin Holland, just for the weirdness of it, and just to punish Kevin Holland for these last 2 fights.
Oh, wow. I hadn't even
sorry,
thought
Phil
about
McKenzie. If you're listening to this, I'm suggesting Kevin Holland be sacrificed for our entertainment, because his lack of entertainment over the last 2 fights has gotten on my nerves. I'd like to see Rodolfo Vieira try and take him to task.
Yeah, I'd love to hear what the hell Holland would tell him during the fight too, man.
you know that would be an absolute mess. It would be typically middleweight. So the main card opener was, I thought, a pretty good fight on a night when action was just really inconsistent. Enrique Barzola, I'd say very good fight. This was a high-paced fight. Enrique Barzola getting a split decision nod over Bobby Moffett, and there was very little grappling, except very little wrestling. But Barzola, much to my annoyance, kept trying to quote-unquote steal the round with late takedowns to end round 1, 2, and 3. And I think he only actually got Moffett down and held him there once, and I think that might have been the first round. But all in all, both men showing that they're much more comfortable, much more effective going forward, I think, with their strikes. And then when it was at range, Moffett had the advantage, but when Barzola was the one pressuring, it felt like Moffett was getting roughed up a bit.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. Barzola's always been a fighter who does best moving forward. He showed some improved boxing because he's always been known for his intense pressure with takedowns, and if he's going to sit back, the only thing he's largely thrown is leg kicks. But he showed some decent fists this time. He's improving in that aspect, and Moffett showed some improved striking as well. His jab was very much on point. As for who deserved the win, I almost would have been happier if the fight had gone to a draw, because I could have seen the scorecards going 30-27 for either fighter, and I would not have had a legit argument. It was one of those fights that was way too damn close to call.
Yeah, much like Luque Perry. I'm at like the Luque Perry statistics. If you go to Fight Metric or UFC Stats, as it's now called, it was as razor thin a decision as you could imagine. The scores might be peculiar for this fight, for like 28-29 and 30-27 and 29-28. All three scorecards, I think, were perfectly reasonable. Maybe 30-27 is a bit stretching it, because I thought Moffett had the better of the second round, but it wasn't anything overly convincing that, oh yeah, Moffett clearly won that round. Good on both men. In fact, if Luque Perry didn't happen, or if it ended in a quick knockout or something, Barzola Moffett probably would have won fight of the night.
It absolutely would have. Yeah, there's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
Did you? I don't know if you saw. Barzola was talking about possibility of moving to bantamweight for his next fight.
Yeah, apparently he doesn't cut a lot of weight to get to 145, and he won Tough Latin America as a lightweight. You know, my stance on weight cutting is if you're going to train yourself to try and gain some sort of physical advantage, I'd recommend against it. But if he can make bantamweight as quote unquote safely as possible, sure, I'm not against it at all. I think his game is probably better suited for bantamweight actually than featherweight.
No, and that's exactly what I was going to say. The size difference between him and Moffett was incredible, and Barzola admitted himself he doesn't cut a whole lot of weight. And if you're going to go for the size advantage, you'll typically want to be a wrestler, and that very much fits Barzola's game. So if he does make the move to bantamweight, I think it's a smart move for him.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So Barzola, Moffett, that opened up the main card. On the preliminary card, Gilbert Burns, short notice, goes back up to welterweight, hopefully permanently, and gets a unanimous decision win over Alexei Kunchenko. Burns certainly impressed those first couple of rounds. He did fade a bit in the last round, but he held on. He staved off that late rally by Kunchenko and handed Kunchenko his first defeat. I think Burns had a very creditable performance, and look, he's been inconsistent with some of his performances at 155. Hopefully, not cutting as much weight can help him steer the ship a bit at 170.
Yeah, I was worried about how he would hold up physically as far as his strength goes in this one, because Kunchenko may not be very tall, but he's a brick shit house at 5'8". You know, he's very difficult to take down, but Burns got him down a couple of times. He faded down the stretch. You know, he had nothing left in the third round and resorted to stalling tactics. But he also took the fight on short notice. I think it was about 2 weeks or so that he took the fight. So give him a little bit of leeway on that. And overall, I'm with you. I'm impressed with his performance. I think he's going to fare better at welterweight than what I initially thought.
Yeah, Burns is the type of guy who just throws with so much power. His leg kicks in particular were bothering Kunchenko just from the first round. Konchenko has got a real problem with output because that last round, even with Burns clearly gassed, and Konchenko actually landed several good leg kicks on Burns that had Burns flop into the mat. Konchenko had 20 seconds to get a finish, really, or at least do something to scrape out a draw and get a 10-8 round. And Burns is clearly exhausted. He's backed up against the fence. Konchenko is pressuring him, and Konchenko threw 3 or 4 strikes. Like, you really got to go for broke in those situations. And that's one of the frustrations I think about Konchenko's UFC career is that, yes, he was undefeated and now he's got the loss, but I think he's capable of more.
Oh, I totally agree with that. Like I said, he's a brick shit house. He hits hard as hell, but he just paces himself at so damn slowly that it's actually amazing that he's been able to win some of the decisions he has, because like you said, the output just hasn't been there for him. It doesn't mean that I think that he's topped out. I mean, they always say that you learn more from your losses than you do your wins. And if this is the first time that he's lost, maybe he actually learned something from it and is able to take himself to the next level.
Mm-hmm. And I should be a little more fair to Burns with this cardio, because he was able to at least get a takedown in the 3rd round to stem some of the tide. But he undoubtedly faded towards the end. But a win is a win on short notice. You got to be happy for him on that front. I really like to see him fight Michael Chiesa.
Ooh, that would be a lot of fun. I'm 100% with you on that one.
Because let's be real here, the remnants of Diego Sanchez is not a particularly great win at welterweight. I feel like these are 2 formerly huge lightweights, and having them fight at 170, I think we could get some really high-level back-and-forth grappling exchanges. And if it stays on the feet, Chiesa has got to be very wary of Burns' power. And Burns, Chiesa is not a world beater of a striker, but Burns' defense is still a bit of a liability that Chiesa could crack him with something in the clinch, for example.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree with that. I really can't add too much more to it. I think that you pretty much nailed it on the head. It would be a fun grappling exchange, and both of them can be dangerous on the feet. But yeah.
So let's move on to the heavyweight division. The debut of Frenchman Cyril Gane submitting Rafael Pessoa by arm triangle choke, 4 minutes, 12 seconds into round 1. If you bet on Gane by submission, I want to see your ticket, because he was plus 2,200 to win by submission. He's somebody who has a big striking background, a Muay Thai specialist, and he is, of course, a training partner and friend of Francis Ngannou, so that was one of the selling points. But Ngannou aside, he was a pretty highly sought-after prospect, and look, the striking might not have been anything to set the world on fire. It wasn't like he was piecing Pessoa up, but the finish itself, and to show a little wrinkle in his game, a different wrinkle to his game, I think that in itself is impressive.
True. It was okay. I think a lot of it for me is that I was less impressed with Pessoa, excuse me. He was swinging wildly. Gane was just kind of picking him off here and there. Like you said, it wasn't anything impressive on the feet. I think what probably was most disappointing for me was Pessoa on the ground. That was supposed to be where he was at his best. And all the credit to Gane for submitting him, but it almost looked like Pessoa handed it to him more than Gane worked for it. So don't get me wrong. I still like what I saw out of Gane. I think that he's going to be a solid addition to the division. But I don't feel like we learned too much out of this fight, just because Pessoa, he looks like he was just a body that they were feeding Gane to.
Yeah, it felt like Pessoa, for somebody who was, at least Bisping said, he'd been training jiu-jitsu since 2006, and I'd really like a double check on that one, because he went for a judo throw, instantly reversed, and he was caught in the arm triangle just seconds later.
Yeah,
that's not good. He didn't provide much resistance either.
Yeah. I would still hope that the UFC takes it easy with Gane. I saw a lot of people saying that they want, what was it, Greg Hardy and Gane? I don't know. That might be interesting, because Hardy's a heavy hitter and Gane's a technical striker. I don't see Hardy doing much on the ground. That might be something that would work.
Yeah, and I should note that Gane does have a submission win, his pro debut against a guy named Bobby Sullivan, who's got a 1-2 record. So this is slightly better opposition that he's submitting here. Although Rafael Pistola does not strike me as somebody who's going to have a long-term UFC career.
No.
Yeah. So for other options for Gane, you got to go towards the bottom of the division, I think. Still, I guess Justin Frazier, if he's still around, or Alan Crowder, I don't think has been cut yet, but I guess if you wanted to send Crowder out of the UFC, that would be an option. But God, this division is still bad. It is just so lacking talent that we're hyped up over Cyril Gane getting a pretty routine win against a guy who's likely not going to be in the UFC in a year or two.
Yeah. And every now and then there's flashes that somebody might develop, but in the last 5 years, I think that Ngannou's been the only one that's really come to fruition. I mean, heavyweight is such a wasteland. Yes,
it is. A division that is not a wasteland is strawweight, and Marina Rodriguez has certainly cemented herself as a contender. Well, even if you don't think she's a contender, she's certainly in the top 15 now. Shutout win over Tisha Torres, who's now lost 4 in a row, but those previous 3 losses were to Jessica Andrade, Joanna Jacek, and Weili Zhang. So Rodriguez was pretty much, I don't want to make this sound like a beating or anything of that nature, but she was in control virtually that entire fight. And the takedown defense is what impressed me the most.
Yeah. Torres continued to shoot for the takedowns because she knew that's where she had the biggest advantage, because Rodriguez was effectively using her size to keep her at bay or to bully her in the clinch, because some of those knees that she landed on Torres were impressive. And like you said, the takedown defense, I'm 100% in agreement with you there. Totally impressed me, because people often think of Torres as strictly a striker, but no, she's taken plenty of opponents down and grinded them out that way. Angela Hill primarily comes to mind. Marina Rodriguez is on the way up. Yeah. I'm sure you got a better thought than I do at this point.
Yeah, it wasn't a scintillating fight. And part of the problem with Tisha Torres is that because she has no finishing ability pretty much at all, other than Juliana Lima, the moment that she lost round 2, it felt like round 3 was a formality. So for Rodriguez, not only was she great with her takedown defense, but her knees, as you mentioned, the knees and the kicks to the body largely kept Torres at bay, and Torres had very little success trying to close the distance and land quick combinations. So even though Torres had the speed advantage, she was outstruck, and she basically, the moment she couldn't get her wrestling going, is like she was out of ideas. And with her ranked at number 8, you would think that Rodriguez, who was unranked at the time, is going to get a pretty high number affixed to her name next week. So looking at options, a lot of the division is booked right now, but I don't know if Courtney Casey is booked, but that would be a decent fight. At least it would be a different physical type of matchup compared to Torres being so undersized. But everybody else is tied up at this moment. I don't really know off the top of my head what fight is next for Marina.
Yeah, I believe that the next highest fighter, the fighter closest to Torres that's ranked higher than her, would be Ansarov, and I would say it's way too early to feed Rodriguez to Ansarov. I think Casey makes a lot of sense. Brianna Van Buren would be an interesting one, but at the same time, Van Buren's a developing prospect herself. Yeah, I'd say Casey.
Yeah, and on Torres' side, look, we've talked about her being undersized before, but that hasn't stopped her from being a strawweight contender. She's gotten wins over bigger fighters in the past, but this was one of her worst performances across her 4-fight losing streak. I don't know if the UFC is going to keep her around. She did just recently sign a new contract, but like, she has an option here. If you stay at strawweight, or if you don't stay in the UFC, I guess you got to consider dropping to atomweight.
Yeah. I do believe that the UFC will add the atomweight division at some point, but I don't think it's going to be anywhere in the near future. And Torres would be a prime candidate to move down there if they were to do it soon. But like you said, I don't think they're going to anytime soon. And it's too bad. I think part of it may be that Torres has been in the combat world for so damn long that she just could be losing interest, because she doesn't seem to have any fire in there, if that makes any sense. Like, Rodriguez basically did whatever she wanted, and when it came time for Torres to really push for the win, it didn't seem like she had that in her.
No, not at all. So again, good win for Marina Rodriguez. Now we get to an all-Brazilian flyweight bout. This probably would actually won fight of the night if it didn't end in such a weird way. Rogério Bontorin getting a cut stoppage victory over Raulian Paiva. This was odd because Bontorin was the one who was cut first off a left hook, and then they stopped the fight briefly. They checked on his cut. He was fine, although his face started swelling up. And then he lands a vicious knee on Paiva, and then I think a punch afterward. And that tore Paiva's eyebrow damn near half off, and that's why they had to stop the fight. And Bisping had said that was like a Vitor Belfort Marvin Eastman situation, and I have to agree that was a no-brainer to stop that fight, and that will haunt my dreams tonight.
True. At least this time we didn't have Joe Rogan comparing it to a goat's vagina, which makes us all wonder what the hell Rogan was doing looking at goats' vaginas. But one of the most infamous calls that he ever made, if you ask me. Anyway, but no, I was absolutely pissed when the fight was stopped, just because I wanted it to keep going. It was looking like it was starting to take off into a barn burner. I completely understand why they stopped it. I don't disagree with it, but the fan in me was like, I want to see these guys throw down, and it was looking like it was going to be a barn burner. And honestly, both of them look like that they could be big players in the division as it rebuilds itself moving forward. So, it's one of those fights that who knows, down the road we could get it remade again.
Yeah, I wouldn't be against doing a rematch down the line of this fight. It was shaping up to be an absolute banger. So in the meantime, Bontorin, he's ranked number 8, and it's not like he's been in the UFC forever. He's almost number 8 by default, given how many people they cut. But a logical fight to make, I believe, given that everybody else is either booked or coming off a loss, him against Matt Schnell, who has just flown under the radar. I think that would be a very compelling matchup.
Yeah, absolutely. I would totally be down with that. And then for Paiva, he could go against the guy that Schnell just beat, Espinoza, and I think that one could be a lot of fun too.
Indeed, but hopefully Paiva heals up after such a grotesque-looking cut. I say cut, but that's more like a wound.
Yeah, that's a gash.
Yes. So moving down, I think this was a bantamweight fight. I'll double-check, but Chris Gutierrez got a split decision win over Geraldo de Freitas. The odd 29-28, 29-28. 27-30 split decision. I didn't have too much issue with it. De Freitas was clearly gassed and just eating so many leg kicks that Gutierrez had the more effective offense in the last 2 rounds. Yeah,
he did. But I also feel like neither fighter really wanted it. Well, okay, I should rephrase that. De Freitas actually pushed the issue in the last round. He wanted it, but he also had plenty of opportunities to score points. Like in the second round, he gets a takedown on Gutierrez and does nothing with it. To me, it felt like I had to give Gutierrez a round for his work on the feet, which wasn't that extensive, but De Freitas did nothing with the takedown when he got it. So, it was one of those fights that I could have gone either way, and I wouldn't have complained. And honestly, I probably could have cared less.
It was not it was bloody. De Freitas, I think, got cut from punches, and then Gutierrez survived an accidental headbutt. And that's when De Freitas made that late push, but it wasn't enough. And De Freitas' striking is just sloppy as hell. Just nothing but wild winging hooks. He's not looking where he's throwing. And Gutierrez did get tagged quite a few times, more than he should have. But as I said, he had the more effective striking, and it wasn't just the leg kicks, but the jabs were getting to De Freitas as well. I was just frustrated that whenever De Freitas would be on the ground, Gutierrez, it was like, as you tweeted out, a willy or won't he, as far as, is he going to follow him to the ground, or is he going to let him stand back up?
Yeah.
It felt like too much of that fight had that.
Totally agreed. Totally agreed.
Yeah. So this is one of those fights where you really don't have much much to say about their long-term prospects. And just for the record, this was a bantamweight bout, and bantamweight, again, a very good division, and I doubt either one of them is touching the top 10 anytime soon. And we got to go to the last two fights here. Lightweight division, Alex de Silva getting a unanimous decision, a shutout win over Kazula Vargas. It was, outside of Shevchenko Carmouche, this was the worst fight of the night. This was barely a fight.
It was all De Silva maintaining position over Vargas on the ground, whether he had his back or had him on the top. I tweeted out that it reminded me of a fight from the UFC circa 2003-2004 when the majority of the fights were wrestlers just controlling guys on the ground. It was not a good fight.
No, it wasn't. Vargas had a couple of decent moments on the feet, but they were just so few and far between, and then anything on the ground was that was essentially a lay and pray performance.
Yes.
It was staggeringly bad to watch. And fights like these, I do not know, other than card filler, what purpose they serve on a UFC event. I mean, how do fights like these build a market? Because if you notice, the Uruguayan crowd was not nearly as boisterous as we've seen so many other Brazilian events or even the show in Argentina or Chile. When fights were bad, they were just dead silent, or they were whistling.
Yeah, you could hear a single person make a noise or something like that. It was nuts. I can't remember anything outside of an Asian card where a crowd sounded like that.
No, not at all. And that's all we're going to talk about. That
I
guess you can say I guess you could say it was a fight, but it was a contest, and De Silva won it pretty clearly. And I really don't want to see either of them again if it's going to resort to that. The opening bout of the prelims, the opening bout of the card, and the last fight we're going to talk about, Veronica Macedo in must-win situation, 69-second win, a nice armbar finish of Poliana Viana, and that also got a performance bonus as well. So if you may recall, Macedo had lost 3 straight. She's very fortunate she even got a 4th UFC fight, but she got it and perhaps saved her job and probably sent Viana out of the UFC, because I believe that's Viana's 3rd consecutive defeat.
Yes, I believe it is. But you know what? I'll be honest with you. I'm happy to see that for Macedo. When she came into the UFC 3 years ago, she came in at bantamweight. She has no business fighting there. She was only 20 years old, having just beat the crap out of a couple of cans. She had no business being in the UFC when she first came in, to be brutally honest. She's developed into a nice fighter. I was hoping that the UFC would cut her some slack, given that they threw her into the lions too quick. And it was a slick little armbar. It probably never should have happened. Viana should have known better, but it did. All the credit to Macedo. Great win for her.
Yeah, part of it, I think Viana is going to be kicking herself, because the 20 seconds prior to her getting armbarred, she was in half guard, and I think she tried to aggressively advance position, and it backfired in a big way. Mm-hmm. Viana is just a very frustrating fighter to watch, because that performance, I think, against J.J. Aldrich really was an eye-opener for me, that she has got a lot to work on. And I thought that when this fight went to the ground, that, okay, this is kind of her wheelhouse. This is where she preferred to be. And she ends up getting tapped fairly quickly. And it wasn't actually a tap. It was a verbal tap.
Yeah.
Yeah, so good for Macedo, saves her position in the UFC roster, and to get a bonus too, especially when the UFC doesn't often give bonuses out to preliminary card fighters. I should note that Volkan Oezdemir got the other bonus, and I think that's well deserved, because if we're going to discuss performances, he had the most complete and eye-catching performance of the night.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. If there was another one that I would have even considered aside from that, it probably was Bontarone's knee, but no, I would have gone with Oezdemir for sure.
Yeah, so that's the entire card. Any final thoughts here on this event? I mean, I gotta say, UFC 241 is an outstanding card. That is going to be, at least on paper, it figures to be one of the better shows of the year. But for me, events like this one and a lot of the other ones that we've been seeing, it just really just drains you as a fight fan to sit through 6.5 hours of that stuff, where, yeah, you get good moments here and there, but it's awash in a sea of really forgettable fights involving fighters that aren't anywhere near the top 15, not top 20. And it just feels like at times you're watching a regional level show passed off as a UFC card.
Oh, yeah. And well, like you said, it just leaves everything blended into one. You want to ask me, how was that fight card 2 weeks ago? I can't tell you which fight card it was 2 weeks ago, or a month ago or whatever. Everything's the same. I mean, if you want to talk about a particular fight, yes, I can probably recall that one, but to tell you which card it was on, oftentimes, I can't do that.
No, it's when we have this stretch that this show, the San Antonio show, it's not like the fights are unbelievably bad. It's just that they're distinctly mediocre in some respects. And then the other fights that do produce something eye-catching, you end up forgetting about it like even an hour later, or you forget about it by the next week because it's just one show after another.
Yeah, and you oftentimes expect a pay-per-view to elevate itself from a lot of this stuff. And the last pay-per-view that we had, no disrespect to what Max Holloway did to Frankie Edgar, but the rest of that card was the definition of mediocre as well. Yeah,
and that really does a disservice to UFC 241. That it's probably not going to get nearly the proper hype that it should.
Yeah.
And the one good thing I'll say is that for this card in Uruguay is that Shevchenko Carmouche wasn't on pay-per-view, and it wasn't a main event. Because remember, it wasn't too long ago that they were thinking about Shevchenko and Sijara Eubanks headlining UFC 230.
Oh, God. Yeah, and that would have been the ultimate trash fire.
Yeah, but if anybody signed up to with the ESPN Plus for the $5 a month to watch this main event, then they probably feel like they got overcharged.
Yeah, they're asking for a refund.
Yes, I would too. So we had to do a lot just to drag this out to 50 minutes worth. And normally these shows go an hour and 5, but there was just not a ton to talk about. But hopefully we satisfied your needs to analyze this event, and hopefully UFC 241 is a heck of a lot better. So on that note, that wraps up this show. You can follow me on Twitter at Mookie Alexander. Dane can be found at the Dane Fox. The Bloody Elbow Twitter account is just at Bloody Elbow. And don't forget, we have Pull No Punches, Care Don't Care, Mookie and Crookie Show, the MMA Vivisection, the Level Change Podcast, and much more, all part of the Bloody Elbow Presents rotation. Next week's sixth round, as I mentioned, and you can probably infer, is going to be for UFC 241, and Zane and Eddie will be back with you for that one. You can check us out at the MMA-Nation SoundCloud and iTunes pages, and we're also on Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, the whole shebang. And of course, you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/bloodyelbowblog. So for Dane and myself, enjoy the rest of your weekend.